Well, hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation on control in criminal justice organizations or law enforcement. This is to fulfill the LP3 assignment for Professor Ben Straight's Management Topics in Criminal Justice course. My name is Michael John Cortez. I am a National American University master's degree student with emphasis on management and criminal justice as my degree that I'm pursuing. A little bit about myself. I have 12 years of combined law enforcement experience in the state of Texas. I am a certified master peace officer through the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. I am a certified advanced SWAT and tactical operator. I have 5 years of supervisory management experience of other subordinate police officers, the last 4 years or so in the investigation side of things. I have an Associates of Applied Science degree in law enforcement that I obtained from South Texas College in 2014. I followed up my associates with an undergraduate bachelor's degree of organizational leadership and management studies, also through South Texas College. I felt that leadership studies is a very big thing in law enforcement right now. So it's very beneficial and has been very beneficial, still is beneficial to me in the job that I perform on a daily basis. I have 9 hours towards a Master's of Management degree with a criminal justice emphasis through National American University, and I am an expected graduate of the class of 2017. So in having an understanding of the scenario that I'm currently being tasked with, I'm a newly appointed sheriff here in the state of Texas, and I'm working to present this presentation on control in law enforcement, or control in the criminal justice world, to colleagues of mine who are also chiefs of police and sheriffs within the state. And our goal is to work collectively to combat newer issues in society that we're dealing with today. And this presentation is, like I said, on control. Control is defined, or we have an understanding of it as being a verb and having meanings such as directing the behavior of a person or an animal, to have power over something, or to cause something to act or function in a certain way. This is certainly true in law enforcement, as law enforcement officers have to have certain control over others to enforce the laws and safeguard the citizens of the community from any type of criminal law violators. We are public servants, and we, in order to carry out that public service and that duty for the public, we need to have a certain type of control over many aspects of the public. So when we talk about control, and it's not just limited to the public or criminal law violators, we also have to have control over ourselves, sort of policing the police. There exist a number of situations in which police managers need to intervene and control other officers' actions. The need for specific written guidelines and policies is necessary to ensure that police managers have provided their officers with specific ruling on how to conduct themselves in almost all situations that they may encounter. So let's start with control and how it applies to the use of force. Specifically, I'm going to cite Texas law, since I am a lawman here in the state of Texas. And in Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 15.24, titled "What Force May Be Used," in making an arrest, all reasonable means are permitted to be used to effect it. No greater force, however, shall be resorted to than is necessary to secure the arrest and detention of the accused. So a lot of generality there, basically stating that officers can use whatever force they need to however, not greater than what they're being subjected to affect any type of arrest or detention of a person. In Texas Penal Code Section 9.51, under titled Arrest and Search, a peace officer or a person acting in a peace officer's presence and at his direction is justified in using force against another when and to the degree that the actor reasonably believes that force is immediately necessary to make or assist in making an arrest or search, or to prevent or assist in preventing escape after arrest. So let's move forward into the use of force continuum. Every officer should be familiar with this. Every officer with any type of basic training, that is, and anybody who's dealing with threats and violators on a daily basis should have an understanding of the use of force continuum. There are many examples. You can find them online. You can find them in text and other sources. But this particular example is it shows the use of force as a circular object. Some people call it a ladder. If you notice, there is really no specific entry or exit into the use of force. An officer's presence, of course, is the initial use of force when responding to calls, but that can quickly jump to the use of lethal force or hard physical control tactics, or even immediate weapons, as long as the situation dictates it. It's just a revolving cycle, and in no way is an officer entitled to jump through each level of the use of force against an individual to subdue an individual who is combative. There's no way that an officer has to go through each level prior to maybe resulting in lethal force if need be. The officer can go straight from his presence to lethal force if the situation dictates it. At the bottom here it says the officer continuously assesses the situation and selects the most reasonable option relative to those circumstances as perceived at that point in time. So what questions should we ask ourselves as law enforcement managers when a use of force situation arises or has already played out? You want to ask yourself, did the officer act appropriately regarding the situation at hand? Did the officer navigate through the use of force continuum when presented with different situations before escalating force on a violator? And that's a perfect situation in which each level of the use of force continuum would be used. To reiterate, you can jump from mere presence to maybe physical control or even deadly force if the situation dictates it. Another question you want to ask is, has or have the officer or officers been trained on your department's use of force policies and procedures? If so, you want to note when was the most recent training. That's very important. Did the violator offer no other outlets for the officer to de-escalate a situation during a use of force encounter? So, having presented shortly on the use of force and the use of force continuum in law enforcement, I want to offer some solutions, and these are both researched and opinion and drawn upon my experiences in law enforcement. Officers should be trained on the use of force policies when they are hired and prior to beginning any type of field training program or programs. Periodic reinforcement of these policies and procedures should be scheduled by the department for the development of your officers. Everyone from chief to the rank and file should be subjected to this training. Diversity training and training newer officers to deal with the differences in cultures and people's perspectives also helps in avoiding excessive use of force issues. In the state of Texas, we're required to take cultural diversity courses as well as ethics training as part of our basic Peace Officer Academy training. and mandated courses every training cycle to reiterate those issues on diversity and or multiculturalism and pertaining to use of force issues. And lastly here, it's to ensure that officers have an understanding of this. Regular and ongoing training should be reinforced throughout the organization. So let's move on to control and in high-speed vehicle pursuits. These are just some statistics, researched statistics presented to me through FBI website or through the FBI website. It states here that the majority of pursuits initiate simply for traffic violations. This meaning regular minor type in Texas, a Class C misdemeanor, which is the lowest type or source of a violation in the state. So the majority of pursuits initiate simply from those type of violations. From 1994 to 1998, one officer was killed every 11 weeks in vehicle pursuits. Officers account for 1% of deaths in pursuits and 42% for innocent third parties. So that's a major cause for concern for us as law enforcement officers, and are swearing to protect those innocent persons and people of the general public. And then 1 out of every 100 pursuits results in fatalities. These numbers are pretty shocking. It makes you think if the actual pursuits are half the time or even the majority of the time worth actually going after that person who's fleeing. So let's compare some vehicle pursuit policy or vehicle pursuit policies within different agencies. Actually, this is the California Law Enforcement Commission in general, as compared to Texas DPS Highway Patrol policies and procedures when it comes to vehicle pursuits. You notice in California, a lot of times you see on the news when the choppers get involved with the pursuits, they start filming right away, and it becomes national news. And really, California is very strict in their rulings and in their laws, and it kind of sets the standard or the tone for other departments, nationwide. And when I say California, I speak about California Highway Patrol with their pursuits, as well as the Los Angeles Police Department. The role of the patrolman is dynamic, as are the factors that an officer would use his or her discretion to start or end a pursuit, meaning that the officer can initiate a pursuit, the officer can become secondary unit in pursuit, the officer needs to call for backup, the officer can disengage. So the roles are very dynamic to that specific officer or officers. The escalated use of force is mentioned in policies such as the use of spike strips or the PIT maneuver, which stands for Pursuit Intervention Immobilization Technique. This is when patrol vehicle, while traveling, alongside or about a quarter of the way next to a suspect vehicle, quickly strikes the vehicle's back end to cause them to kind of spin out and immobilize them. As well as the use of firearms is permitted in the policies of the California Law Enforcement Commission. The safety of the general public is stressed. Officers of the department, as well as the suspect, is stressed while engaged in pursuits. In the Texas DPS, or Texas Highway Patrol Division, highway patrolmen and their supervisors have discretion on whether to continue or end vehicle pursuits. They need to give that power to the patrolmen simply because A lot of times there is no room for a supervisor to join into a pursuit and kind of direct the patrolman on what he or she should be doing. A lot of times highway patrolmen of Texas DPS work in very rural areas away from the city limits. So they have to have that discretionary power to either start or stop or end while in pursuit of a vehicle. Deadly conduct prior to the year 2015, including shooting or using deadly force to disable a vehicle, was previously authorized. Now this has changed, and that year 2015 is a keynote there. And it's funny because this incident actually that caused a change or scrutiny of their pursuit policies occurred in the region where I live in South Texas. There was a vehicle pursuit in which DPS had engaged in. It was a vehicle suspected of having smuggled or having been in the process of smuggling drugs across the border lines here in South Texas. The DPS chopper was involved, and it was actually a sniper situated inside of the DPS chopper. That sniper, in attempts to immobilize the vehicle, took a shot, went ahead and did so. However, the back of the vehicle, instead of with illegal narcotics or any other type of drugs or contraband, it was loaded with persons. It was loaded with people, illegal immigrants, and the crash and immobilization or demobilization of the vehicle resulted in the death of several individuals. So that caused a lot of scrutiny as far as DPS and their tactics and pursuit policies. From January 2005 to July 2010, there were 4,900 pursuits statewide. And that's just that agency. These pursuits resulted in 1,300 crashes, with 780 people suffering injury and 28 persons losing their lives. I've had my fair share of vehicle pursuits as well while part of the patrol division and even into the investigative division while assisting patrolmen. It's not always pretty. It doesn't always result in what you are believing, the issue at hand to be. And sometimes you end up either, luckily I've never been involved in a pursuit in which somebody lost their life, but there has certainly been property damage and casualty of that sort, which will always raise heads and questioning of your policies and the decision making that you made on that particular incident. So let's talk about some solutions to control over vehicle pursuits. Agencies should work to find a balance in use of force and the need for vehicle pursuits in nonviolent situations. Reinforcement of policies regarding vehicle pursuits should also be regularly trained on so that officers are able to make sound decisions when dealing with these stressful situations. The need for deadly force of any type should only be used when absolutely necessary, and the type of deadly force used should be regulated by your departmental policies and guidelines. Each department is different. Each department either may or may not have the ability or the to use deadly force to disable a vehicle, as well as I want to reiterate that there should be a balance. Going back to the reasoning why most of these pursuits commence for minor traffic violations, there should be a balance in the use of force policies and the need for vehicle pursuits in nonviolent type situations. I have a certain understanding, and I agree with, pursuing vehicles which are stolen, or in which an individual may have committed some type of heinous act, or very highly regarded felony in the state. Um, as long as it's done in a manner of which the officers are actively keeping in mind those policies and procedures set forth by their department prior to. Another very important topic, bias in police operations, or bias type police operations. Bias, specifically racial and cultural bias, is an important subject matter in today's law enforcement world. Racial and cultural bias cannot occur while enforcing the laws in our respective areas. You run into possibility of violating persons or people's Fourth Amendment rights, as well as Constitution of the Constitution and their civil rights, when you use racial bias or cultural bias while in performing the duties of your job as a law enforcement officer. Now, you almost see it on a daily or weekly basis. Anytime a white officer gets involved in the shooting of a black citizen, or a black officer is involved in the shooting of a white citizen, or any other type of race or persons in law enforcement, when any of those situations occur today, you see the media and social uproar over that, and I think that, in my opinion, bias plays a part in that. People dictate situations, and people have a certain understanding of the way that things are being reported, to which they're led to believe that there's some sort of agenda for these white or black officers to carry out use of force issues, or shootings and excessive force against persons of the opposite race, which I'd have to say is certainly not what I've seen in my experience as a law enforcement officer, and can't say that I know anybody in the area where I work that works that way. If I certainly were to witness something like that, the situation would be discussed and also reported to proper personnel to handle those issues as it's occurring. So let's look at some solutions. And then going back, let me elaborate just a little bit more. In the area where I live, South Texas, it's dominantly, populated by Hispanic individuals. We're so close to the southern border. I live about approximately 10 minutes away from the border of Mexico, that you're going to find that culture and those type of people in this area. I myself am Hispanic as well, or of Hispanic descent. And when you go to other areas or other geographical areas of the country, you're going to find that those areas are predominantly populated by certain types of people, or certain races of people. Just because that's areas or the regions that they are prominent to or live in. So when there's an isolated incident of one type of officer carrying out a use of force issue, or using the force continuum properly and then being scrutinized for it, that I can't say that officer, or you can't say that officer strictly is targeting any certain type of persons. It just there's a violation of the law and it's happening in front of you, You have a duty and you're sworn to protect the public, and you're a public servant, and you have to act upon that. So it's a tough job, and it's only getting tougher. Um, let's talk about some solutions on biased police operations, or bias in police operations. Every certified peace officer in the state of Texas is subjected to racial profiling and ethics courses within the curriculum of their basic peace officer academy. States should follow suit and place into effect standards and guidelines when dealing with multiculturalism and policing. Policies and procedures to include punishment due to the use of bias and enforcing the laws of your respective areas should be set in place and should be regularly taught to the officers of the department. Everyone from management to rank and file officers should be subjected to this regular training. So another hot topic in today's society, and especially this is very important to me because I've just seen difference in the way that things are being reported and the way that the media reports issues, especially incidents involving police in today's society as compared to when I was growing up. So let's talk about media interactions, reporting, and the dissemination of information to the media, because we need to stay on top of that as well and have certain control over the media. Today's criminal justice managers should be well aware of the media, how they report, and what negative publicity can do to an organization in the eyes of the public. The major types of media today are still as were from years prior, with the exception of social media and the internet. The types of media include television, print, radio, social, and internet media. So your most common forms of media reporting is probably still television media. The difference in the way the media is being reported as from years past is key when understanding television reporting. News media outlets today care more about ratings, or seem to care more about ratings, and who is on the scene first. Television news reporters often misconstrue the truth to draw viewers into a situation that may not be as important as it seems. False reporting or informing of the public or misinforming of the public is something criminal justice and law enforcement managers should be aware of when reporting incidents to the media. So let's continue and talk about internet and social media, which is the new age form of mass media or public outreach, which is either communicated either via short videos or text to the public through public forums and social media websites such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you haven't been living under a rock in the last couple of years, you probably have one of these accounts. I have Facebook and Instagram accounts. I use them mainly to keep in touch with family members who may be distant from the area where I live, as well as friends or past friends that I had. And also I use them to my advantage to keep up with the times and and only of course through trusted media sources to view news or activity that's going on around the United States and in the world. So the majority of you probably do have Facebook or Twitter or an Instagram account to do the same. So there's some very important things that we need to consider as law enforcement managers or criminal justice managers in today's society when dealing with media or the dissemination of information to the media. And some of the solutions that I've come up with or that I'd like to share with you are that the department should designate a representative of the department to disseminate information to the media and perform news reports when necessary, usually called your PIOs, which are your public information officers. This is important because the reporting of information should follow guidelines set forth by state law when disseminating classified or law enforcement information. The chief, sheriff, or other respective head of any law enforcement or criminal justice organization should oversee what is being disseminated and approve of said dissemination prior to its release. There needs to be oversight on this at all levels. The designated public information officer, or PIO, should have a clean background, and their ethics or integrity should not be questioned, as this will be the face of your department. You need to understand that. You can't have Joe Schmo out there who just got off of 5 consecutive complaints of being rude to the public or discourteous to the public, or having had his or her ethics in question with your local prosecutor's office. You don't want to designate one of those type of persons or people within your department, and really you should be dealing with those people in other ways, but you don't want to designate them as the face of your department. So you need to pick that individual wisely. And lastly, the department should practice disseminating information that is accurate and concise regarding police involvement in matters before, and this is key, before mainstream media does so, that the public does not question the police, but rather the media on their reporting of certain non-factual information. You don't want to look like the bad guy. You want to get that information and be transparent with the media and with the public on issues involving police before the media puts it out there and kind of adds their little spin to what was actually occurring. So let's move forward and talk about Theory X and Theory Y types of management in policing. Very important, not just in policing to understand this, but in all types of organizations. Theory X, just a little bit of highlights as far as what it involves, or what the concept behind it is, that Theory X employees, or the concept that follows the traditional view of directing and controlling employees. The ordinary employee in this type of model is believed to strive to avoid the act of actually working. States that people have to be coerced to work, and reinforcement of punishment is in place to reach the goals of the organization. Employees are most concerned with job security and survival, and need to be constantly under supervision to achieve tasks or things that they've been assigned to within the organization. In Theory Y, it's a little more centered towards the development of employees and understanding that these type of employees, or employees in general, can sort of help themselves and actually come to work and get the job done. It suggests self-actualization of employees' needs and desire to work. Theory Y, employees need little supervision while committed to an objective. Employees have the capacity to develop on their own. Any avoidance of responsibility or lack in performance is due simply to probably their experience levels. Theory Y, managers should promote individual goal achievement by creating an atmosphere that allows for it. Now let's integrate Theory X and Y into previous topic that we spoke about, the use of force. In Theory X, these type of managers who follow this management or these management protocols would probably stress that when people are out of line, that strict reinforcement or actions of the use of force would work best to combat their force and non-compliance. They would eventually succeed when the situation is under control after physical compliance was used to de-escalate a situation. In Theory Y, this type of manager or supervisor would work to effectively talk or persuade an individual from the get-go upon contact with them and upon learning that the person is non-compliant. They would also eventually succeed when the person comes to self-actualization that they don't need to be acting in the way that they are. So let's apply theory X and Y to high-speed pursuits. The theory X manager would constantly be reinforcing policies and procedures regarding pursuits as a way of embedding said material into the heads of their subordinates. The theory Y manager, after having trained and reinforced policies and procedures to the subordinates, would allow the officer to dictate the outcome of a situation, trusting in their growth, development, and experience. So theory X and Y as placed or having part of bias in policing. The Theory X manager would enforce strict policies and procedures set forth dealing with bias and civil rights on a continuing basis to the people that they manage. The Theory Y manager would allow the personal development of an individual in combination of training and reutterance of policies to take over in situations where bias may come into question. And lastly here, Theory X and Y as dealing with the media. The Theory X manager in dealing with the media would be proactive in working with news outlets to report what is right and strictly the truth. This manager would hold media outlets accountable when exaggerations of the truth are reported. The Theory Y manager would report to the media what is correct and accurate and would allow the public to dictate the message that is being conveyed in any way that it is being presented to them. So after having presented this information to you all regarding control in law enforcement and specifically dealing with the main topics or main issues that we as managers in law enforcement see on a daily basis now in our society, I've kind of devised just a short and simple plan in conclusion of the presentation that we can all follow to ensure that we are working within the guidelines and working as effective as possible to combat these issues. Number one, we need to perform a top-down analysis of our department to include personnel, structure of the department, our training programs, and as well as most importantly our policies and procedures. Number two, policies and procedures need to be tailored to the modern day issues we face in today's society and specific to the types of issues we deal with locally in our communities. Number three, training upon initial hiring and reinforcement of the department's policies and procedures to include the department's mission and overall organizational goals needs to be clear and continuous. And last but not least, number four, nobody in the organization is above the mission. As public servants, we need to remember this and remind ourselves about this on a daily basis every time we put that badge and gun on. Leadership starts at the top and trickles down to your subordinates. So this marks the end of the short presentation on control in law enforcement, or control from the aspect of a criminal justice manager. Any questions or any clarification on any type of research that I performed or my personal opinions can be either emailed to me at the email provided, or feel free to contact me at the phone number provided, or if you just want to kind of sit down and talk or chit chat about issues that you've seen, that as opposed to what we're dealing with down here in South Texas, I'd be all ears. Just please contact me at those two outlets there. My phone number and my email are provided. Thank you.